Welcome back, everyone, to the Unfounded Podcast. My name is Christopher Turner, and I am your host. And I'm excited to bring this episode to you today because it's a little bit different. So I'm going to take a couple minutes here to explain it first, because this is a new series that I'm going to be offering for you. It's from our TikTok live videos that I've been doing here for a couple months. At least. And I did a book club there for a little while, and then I focused on kind of philosophical topics. So we read Nietzsche and we read Marcus Aurelius and Rousseau, and that went really well, but I found myself really wanting to focus more on spiritual topics. As a matter of fact, the listeners, the viewers wanting to, or seemingly always wanting to ask me questions about spirituality and channeled messages. So and when I talk, as many of you obviously know, if you listen to this podcast, I tend to channel. Many of the messages that come through are channeled messages. So this series is focused on enunciating that intentionally. These are live episode or live channeled message episodes that I stream live on TikTok. So if you want to be a part of the audience and participate in the conversation, follow me at Chris the Sage. That's THA Sage. And you can ask your own questions or be a part of the next episode. But it's really important to kind of explain what you're looking for in these episodes, because they're going to be a lot different. Like I said, this is intentionally a channeled message live. So I do a lot of work beforehand, opening myself up to whatever energies would like to communicate, meditating on what messages are necessary for whoever's going to be listening to this, specifically whenever they're going to be listening to it, which is the one thing that I really want to explain to you as a listener before we get started. These bonus episodes, the live channeled messages that I'm going to be offering, are going to be timeless, as is everything else that I offer in the Unfounded Podcast. But specifically because these are going to be different messages from different people. You'll hear other people's stories in here, and I'll be giving advice to other people that you most likely do not know, right? Listen, and especially listen to how you feel while you're engaging with these episodes, because I guarantee you that your guides, whatever you believe in, are trying to, or bringing you to this episode, if you are listening to it, to help you heal in some way. So with that, as I hear the music starting to turn on here, guys, I'm going to leave you with the episode and let you enjoy it. But I really do thank you for being a listener, a supporter of the podcast up until this point. And I hope you enjoy this episode, and I hope it helps you in some way. If it does, give it a like, share it, subscribe, and I will be back on here soon with some more traditional content for you. Lots of love. Thanks for the follow, Khalid. I appreciate you. And for the gifts, guys, I appreciate it. All right. So, clearing out that negative energy to start the live. Like I said, if you guys are used to my other lives, this is going to be a little different. It's a little bit of a test as well for me. But we're going to just focus on channeled messages because I tend to bring a lot of channeled messages when I'm doing lives, specifically when I was doing readings, when I do my podcast. So this is, like I said, a little bit of a new process for me, but I want to intentionally go into it to try to bring channeled messages through for anybody else that is looking for a message. If you have questions, you can drop them in the comment section. Doesn't necessarily mean I'll be able to get to them, but we'll try to orient the energy towards the group that's in here right now, bringing forward whatever messages kind of need to be heard in the moment. It is a full moon, right? And like I was saying earlier, for me at least, it's been a lot of energy. I'm sure a lot of you are feeling it as well. Not every full moon hits everybody in the same way. We're all kind of, we have different qualities to us, so we sense and feel things differently depending on the full moon, where its placement is and kind of how it's aligned with us. So I believe it's in Aquarius right now, if I'm not mistaken. The energy that I'm getting is kind of a big mixture of, it's like a mixture of air and water energy, right? So you have a lot of deep emotion coming up, but there's also this kind of intellectual side to it too, like that traditional air energy. The intellect itself, for me today, has been kind of on fire, but it's also been kind of rooted in some deep emotions that have been somewhat confusing. So the best way I could describe the energy today is somewhat like a roller coaster. I've had outbursts or been feeling like I need to release a lot throughout the day. So if you're in that same kind of energy today, if you've been noticing that today's been a frustrating day for you, know that that's part of the energy, or at least that's the energy that I've been picking up as well. So you're not alone in that. And that's kind of what full moons are for in general, right? In general, the moon represents like this mirror energy, right? The part of ourselves that we don't usually reflect on. It can represent the shadow side of ourselves as well. So when we come to full moons, usually it's a culmination time. It's a period to reflect on the parts of ourselves that we usually don't give a time of day. And that tends to be the more shadow aspects of ourselves. So as those parts of ourselves come up, we tend to get a little more chaotic, a little more anxious, all of this. And that's partially actually where the term lunacy stems from or comes from, which I find fascinating as well, is this quality within people that tends to make them go a little bit crazy when the moon is out. And it actually roots a lot of our myths and our legends, specifically werewolf legends, right? Around people turning into the animal when they see the full moon. A lot of energy came through right to begin there. I got to take a little bit of a breath because I was on one. Give me a second. Oh, and you know what? It might be a little quiet. That might be a little bit better now. You probably can hear me better. I had the pad on. Hopefully you can hear me better now. Hey, Kel, thanks for being here. Hey, Tiffany, thanks for being here. And all of you, thank you for being here. All the love so far. I appreciate you. Kel asks, is it easier for loved ones / messages to come through with like full moon energy or no? Yes. So it not always, but it tends to be kind of similar to similar time frame to 3 o'clock, right? So during the day, every day kind of mirrors every month and every year. So there's certain time periods where the veil is thinner. During every day, that tends to be around the 2 to 3 to 4 time period. In that range, you'll usually get messages both daytime and nighttime, so at night and in the morning, but also around full moons in the cycle of the month, right? You might have more messages, you might have more weird things happen, right? Unexplainable things happen around the house. If you do have something trying to communicate with you, they're more than likely going to come through on a full moon. At least from my experience, that's what I've experienced. So, excuse me. Happy supermoon, Diddy. Thanks for being here. 11/11. Yeah, so there's a lot of and that's another one. Thank you for putting that in here, Bastarch. I appreciate it. Both of you guys, El Diddy, thank you, because that's another energy that's coming through. I've noticed today. I posted about it actually when I decided to do this live. There's an energy of kind of blessings, like abundance coming through, but it's requiring us stepping into it, right? It's a new beginning kind of energy. I'm feeling a lot of the chaos and the deep emotions that are coming up for us right now are centered around that, right? It's around this stepping out into the new, but it's very deeply rooted in each of our individuals' passions, right? What our vision for the future is for our own lives and what our dreams are and those kinds of things, right? And so as we have the courage to step into that, right? As we have the courage to step into a more true version of who we are, this energy of blessing is coming through. That 11/11, that's how I always see 11/11, right? Is as this kind of divine blessing or stepping into what you've earned essentially through the spiritual work that you've put in. And like I said, that's kind of a fractal quality idea. So that happens both every day, every month, and every year, right? We have these time frames in which we're rewarded for the work in which we're kind of the toil of our day and our month and our year, right? Do I know anything about Lionsgate Portal? Me, no. And there's a lot of parts of the spiritual community that I'm not going to be as familiar with, right? I don't necessarily study like astrology specifically or tarot cards specifically. My gifts, the way they manifest, have been completely self-discovered, right? I'm self-taught. and I'm always open to learning as well. So, but the channel messages, when they come through for me, I'm speaking through my own experience, and the way that I've learned that those are channeled messages is basically just by creating a podcast, listening back to it, and understanding that had relevance to other people besides me. Right? There's a beauty to each individual person, the psychic beings that we truly are, when we recognize that everything we say has value, everything, and I mean everything, and that oftentimes, especially when we're speaking out of balance, what we're often doing is giving ourselves we're giving ourselves advice, but we're projecting it towards other people, right? So we're all I guess what I'm trying to say is we're all very powerful channelers, and we don't recognize it, right? And I believe partially, at least for me, part of the reason why it's somewhat intimidating is because you want to be kind of an expert in a field. That's at least how I think we conceptualize it, is by wanting to be an expert first in what you're doing before you kind of share it with the world. But that's one of the recognitions that I've come to as well, not only in this venue, but also in things like music and other creative aspects and outlets, that there's not really a good time to share who and what you are. But as long as it's authentic, that's the point. There's something about spirituality and authenticity that's been coming through recently as well, that the most powerful form of energy we have is our authentic self, right? And that forms that protects us in the world in a way that we don't often recognize. And that Belly, I'm kind of going through them right now specifically. Nothing in the moment, but I'm trying to do kind of general for the collective messages right now, just so you know. So I know many people are going to want specific messages for them pertaining exactly to what's happening in their life right now. But I'm going to try to attempt to explain why I think that while you can find that in the world, many times those specific messages, they're more comforting than they are helpful. And what I mean by that is oftentimes the messages that are coming through, the reason you can speak to a collective or you can speak in general to people is because we are all connected kind of to the same thing fundamentally. And while we may be at different points in time or different points in the awakening experience, we're all going on the same journey. And it is the same story repeated, which is partially why the tarot cards work. This is also why you see the same story in many different religions throughout history. It's why you can see it in even secular figures, the awakening process, the awakening story unfold, that we're each going through this continual journey, and that general message you can take and apply to your individual life. So there may be times, and I have had that happen before, where I have an individual message come through for somebody that's sitting, and I'll usually identify, hey, there's somebody in here right now that this is coming through specifically for, and you'll know if it's you, right? Because it'll be specific for you. I don't ever have it come through the other way. Now that may not be true for other people. I see a lot of people do that, right, in the spiritual community, where they'll have people say, hey, do you have a message for me from my wife or my whatever? And it can happen. I've had it happen. I'm not denying that exists, but I'm trying to be as authentic and honest with you as I can be about the way that I experience these gifts. And that's the way it comes through for me, is in a general kind of channeled message. If there is a message or somebody pops in like that, you'll know, and I'll let you know, right? Because it'll be very specific and you won't miss it, right? But I want to clarify that for not only you, but anybody else that joins the live. And because I do think there's a misconception over the spiritual world and the spiritual gifts, how they manifest. And I think that does a disservice to people that are looking to get into the spiritual community or hone their own abilities. Right, guys, this is the most important part of, and this is a big channeled message coming through right now for anybody watching, is you are a psychic being, right? You have this ability. I don't have to tell you anything. You already know. Everybody already knows what the next step is for them. The reason we don't look there is because usually it's something that we've hidden from ourselves. It's something that's a very hard step to take. It could be terrifying. It could be limiting in some way, right? It could demand something of us we don't want to give. There's a myriad of different things. None of them reflect badly on you as an individual because you feel those things. These are just, thank you very much, Lady Starlight. I appreciate you. Thank you for your support, because this is what I do for a living too. So your support really does help me out. I appreciate that. But I do feel overwhelmed, honestly, and kind of intimidated entering into the spiritual community because of how differently I feel this manifests for me personally versus the way I see it presented, right? Again, I do not want to, I'm not speaking bad or ill on anybody or their gifts. I believe in this stuff, right? It is real. I promise you that. Matter of fact, if you question these things, you're starting on the path to figuring out that they are real, right? That's the starting point. But that we all have the ability to channel information, right, from source. You can call it different things. You can call it the Akashic record, but the only way you get there, thank you, Lady Starlight, the key itself is belief. And that may be confusing, that may sound kind of crazy, but the only way you are able to see something is to believe it first. It's the way this reality is constructed fundamentally. And so as a psychic being, the first thing we have to do is say, I am one, right? And when you do that, you unlock, you grab a key, and then you tell the universe, hey, I recognize I have the ability to receive information, right? To sense something larger. Can you start bringing that to me? And I guarantee you, I promise you, and if there is anybody that's looking for that in here right now, tonight, I'm sure there is, that conversation is all that needs to happen. And it will start to happen. What it demands of you is belief, right? Your faith. And that's a risky kind of process because it will force you to let go of conceptions of the world, parts of yourself that you may have held on to up until that point, that may even, change your life in ways that are uncomfortable, right? So I think the reason we often don't express this side of ourselves, the psychic side of ourselves, the reason that we kind of hold it back or hold it down is because it demands a lot of us, right? And that's okay. It's not a criticism of us. This is the hardest thing you can do, I think, is to be your most authentic self, and at least in the world we live in today. There's a lot of energy right now. I'm trying to move through my body. So if anybody watching right now is anxious, a message coming through as well is pay attention to where it is in your body. We often overlook those sensations, those emotional and physical, the emotions that are attached to physical sensations. But it's really important when you start to feel overwhelmed, specifically with whatever emotion it is, right? Thank you, JP. When you start to get overwhelmed with any emotion, but a good example of one is like anxiety. Before you get lost in the panic, try to press pause and look at where it is practically, physically in your body, right? Because you'll notice that there's a crossing over between your consciousness, right? What you're thinking, the anxious thoughts that are racing in your head, and the physical sensation that you're feeling, right? Thank you, Pickles. I appreciate that. And this is actually something that's backed up in psychology, right? This is part of the way you work through trauma, right? Because there's a hook in us, right, that crosses over between repetitive thought and action and kind of physical trauma in the body. And so we have to work very intently on watching how we're feeling, nurturing ourselves in the way that we would need, and we have to be that for ourselves. Nobody else is going to do that. So, for instance, if you're feeling really anxious, like for instance today, it's a full moon, right? Maybe you're having a lot of ups and downs, like I was having today, where you feel maybe a lot of outburst energy that you thought you've processed, but it's coming back up. Instead of overwhelming yourself even more and judging yourself and saying, "Man, you really should have it together right now," press pause on that feeling and say, "Okay, what else is going on that could be contributing to this, and where is it sitting in me? How can I release this energy? How can I take that vibration that's starting to tense, and how can I make it go relax? Right? And you'll notice as you ask that question, thank you, Lady Starlight, I appreciate you. As you ask that question, you'll have a certain kind of almost narrative play out in your head. It may even take you back to a memory. You might find yourself daydreaming about a past event that was traumatic as you're working on relaxing, and you'll see that's what that was attached to. That was part of that memory. That was part of the trauma that it was attached to, right? So, interesting messages coming through to start off here, guys. Kind of jumping all over the place, but that tends to be how they come through. I have because I haven't done channeled messages in a while, or this is one of the first time I'm opening up intentionally just for that. There's going to be a lot of things trying to pop in and say stuff, so it's going to bounce all around. But anywho, thank you for all the comments, guys. Thank you for the likes and all the follows and all the love. I really appreciate you. All right, I'm going to try to get a couple of these comments here so I'm not missing them. I don't want to ignore all the comments. Let's see here. Wolverine, thank you. Lady Starlight says, I've heard that the highest frequency comes from authentically being your most genuine self. Absolutely, Lady Starlight. That's what I've heard as well. That's what I feel. And thank you very much for all your donations or gifts. Thank you. I appreciate that. But that actually leads me to, it was a video I was watching on TikTok not too long ago, probably about 3 or 4 days ago now. One in which it was some kind of study they did, and I wish I could remember. I'll have to look for it and find it and repost it. So any of you that follow me, I'll repost it for you. But in which they were doing some kind of a study of the auric field, right? You can map it. I'm not familiar with exactly the ways that you can do that, but I'm pretty sure you can even photograph the aura with under the right wavelengths, right? So they were doing this kind of experimentation, and they were having people go into meditation and meditate on certain, vibrations. So like the vibration of love. Think of something you love, the love of your life or something, and we're gonna take a video or an image of your auric field. It was more of the energy potential of it, right? So it'd be like, how much charge does it have fundamentally? And what they found was that, you'd assume love would be the most powerful vibration. But the most powerful one, and actually from this study, like I said, I'm quoting something that I don't have a reference for right now, unfortunately, but they said it was 4 times as powerful in their experiment that they did. That when people were going in there and just speaking honestly, that the vibration they were outputting was much more potent than even when they were thinking about or contemplating something that they loved, right? Which, when I saw that, resonated as true, which is partially why, because it resonates with my experience as well. I also believe that's why authenticity in the world is one of the rarer things we have, right? Because if it puts out a lot of energy, it requires a lot of energy. To be authentic in a world that is inauthentic requires a tremendous amount of energy, right? And not only that, but courage, because you have to be something that's radically different. This is what is being asked of all of us right now. This is the new energy that we're being asked to step into, right? And this time frame, for me specifically, has always been about that, at least for the last couple of years, about really letting go of everything you've been going through, right? And stepping into a new version of yourself. And that's a continual process. Like I said, it happens every day, month, and every year, right? And you just keep doing this. As an individual, as a collective, if we can get this process more fully integrated, then we're on a path towards kind of a higher vibration world, essentially, right? But it's a very organic process, one that can't happen top down, has to happen bottom up, right? Individually with your motivation. So anyway, there's a lot of letting go, right? But also allowing yourself to the liberation that comes with that. Thank you, Lady Starlight. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. The liberation that comes from that. And knowing that there's a community, and everybody that's in here right now, that there is a community of people that we're going to do this together. You don't have to feel alone in this anymore. Why? Because we're going to do it with you, right? I'm doing it right now with you. This is my version of it. This is incredibly intimidating for me to do, right? To get on a live broadcast and to spread the messages that I get individually. Why? Because it demands that I go further in my belief, right? I take that further and represent it to everybody else. I demonstrate this is something I believe so wholeheartedly that I'm willing to tell it to you, right? I'm willing to say it to you just like, and be judged for it. Like the gentleman right at the very beginning, right? That made the comment. You'll find as you become, thank you, Pickles, as you become a more authentic version of yourself, you will encounter that kind of resistance, and sometimes more so than the encouragement, but that what you'll find is the rewards you get is worth the resistance, and that there's a the reason why people throughout history have pushed in one direction, right? The direction history has been pushing is towards this fundamental truth of freedom, like liberty at the individual level, right? We have fought for this idea throughout all of human history. And I really think it's coming to a culmination right now in today's day and age. It's becoming more obvious because of, thank you, Lady Starlight, thank you. Because of the technology we have, the beautiful sides of the technology that we often forget about, right? It has the capacity to manipulate, right? Technology has the capacity to manipulate, gaslight, control, destroy, but it also has the capacity to unite, to liberate, right? And to shine light on untruth, if it is leveraged properly. At 26, and this is a certain kind of, 26 is my birthday number, so it's a homecoming, right? There's a certain homecoming that we're being asked to have with ourselves individually right now, on this full moon specifically, uniting the way we feel with the way we think. Thank you, Pickles. Oh, that's beautiful. I've never had that before. Thank you. Yeah, uniting those parts of ourselves, right? Because I at least many times what we'll find is we'll have ideas, right? We'll have ideas come through. You may get downloads yourself, often, right? But like me, you may find that some of them can even be really silly sometimes. Some of the ideas you'll have will come through and you'll say to yourself, that's dumb. You know what I mean? Or you'll laugh maybe. But what I've noticed is those ideas, if you give them a little bit of credit, and you root them with what you're feeling. That's the big part of it. The rooting in kind of the emotion that you're feeling, right? Why it's important to you. Every thought you have is important. Why is that one important? Don't write it off. Don't say that that's a silly thought because you can't see the point of it right now. How about take a second and root that in what you feel right now? And then you may find the point. That's how new things come into being, right? Is somebody having kind of the audacity to say, wait a minute, that's not stupid. That's not stupid. That's a good idea. I'm going to bring that down. I'm going to make that into reality. We often forget that we are the thing that makes things into reality. There's nothing else out there that does it besides human beings, right? Everything else just does them. Human beings make this. Human beings do them and everything else, and to our detriment sometimes, but damn, that's impressive. Thank you, Lady Starlight. Thank you very much. So give ourselves credit for that too. Give yourself credit for the ideas, even the crazy ones, especially the ones that are way out there, right? The way you can do that, the way you can honor them is by recognizing where they're coming from internally, right? Why is that a beautiful idea? Why does it make you giggle, right? And if you gave it a little bit of credit, in what way would it make the world a better place, right? Even if you just told the story of it. See, that's the funny thing is, like, silly ideas, maybe they are silly, but maybe that's the point. Was that not meant to be shared, in the way a comedian would share something that's silly? There's truth in silliness, right? That's why we laugh at comedians. That's why the comedian, the jester, was one of the most important parts of medieval society, right? Matter of fact, very interesting point. Going on a weird tangent here. I'm going to drink of water. The medieval jester, many of you may be familiar, but was one of the only positions in the court in medieval courts that was protected. So that in general, if anybody disrespected the king or the queen, right, or the royalty, they'd be killed or imprisoned, or immediately there was a punishment. It was against the law to do that, right? So you'd get in trouble if you did that. Hey, Carol, thanks for being here. But the jester was had an immunity to this, which is partially why it was the goofball, right? Why they went around and kind of made fun of the king, jested. A good example of this is in like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, right? You have the jester that does the play outside and makes fun of the religious leader. I forget his name. Anyway, you often wonder, like, why were those guys allowed to do that? And this is the reason why. It's because the truth that those jesters told, even though it was relayed in a comedic form, the kings and queens recognized it had value. That's why they protected them. Because when you're in a position of power like that, when you're isolated, and people are always telling you what you want to hear, specifically because they're scared of you, right? You genuinely cannot figure out what's real. Because nobody will tell you what's real, right? They're just going to tell you what you want to hear. And that can drive people insane. Can you imagine begging somebody to tell you the real truth, even if it's a bad one, and they won't do it, right? Hence the jester, right? Hence comedy in our society, right? And its deep importance. Also, coming to another part of the message for us today on this full moon and it's actually peaking right about now, I think. So this is the peak of the energy. You can really feel it. Just like El Diddy just said, I find the positive in every situation. We're being asked to pull ourselves out of that negative kind of muck we've been sitting in for the last couple months. The world has been nasty and is a nasty place many times, right? It often can be if we look at it and stare at that stuff. But we also have to recognize, like, that's always the case to a certain degree. That's part of the way reality is structured. It's the low end of the vibration, right? It's the yin to the yang kind of an idea, right? So if we're too stuck on looking at all of the horribleness of this physical reality, we won't allow ourselves to see or even create a possibility of a beautiful world. We can actually start to deconstruct the world. That may sound crazy, but I mean it. You have the power to construct your reality. You don't make the whole thing. You can't do it for me, but we're all doing it together. So if too many of us start staring at the darkness for too long, we'll make it. Will become that. There's a reason why in a lot of horror movies and stuff, there's this message of you don't touch the darkness without being kind of tainted by it. You don't want to stare into it too long, kind of a thing, right? Because it'll stick with you. And that's another, thank you, Pickles. That's another message coming through right now. How are we experiencing this? Look in what we consume, right? I'm not saying, you have to, this is not a moral message. The message that is coming through is literally what makes you feel good. Ask yourself that when you're watching something. Ask yourself that when you're playing something. Ask yourself that when you're around a group of people. Ask yourself that when you're eating certain types of food or drinking certain things. How is it making you feel? Is this something that's drawing you down, or is this something that's making you feel joy? That passion for life is the best way I could put it. Not it's just joy, but a passion for what this is. Every moment is meant to be that, right? And I think part of our journey is for us to find a way to be in that vibration all the time, right? Fully recognizing that the possibility of it being low vibration is always there, and that we will have that at times. But that our intent is to be in that vibration of joy and happiness and authenticity. And that this has actually been a hard lesson for me recently, which is why I speak on it. For anybody else that maybe has had a tendency throughout their life to get stuck staring at the darkness, right? If you're highly empathetic, you may have that quality. You may tend to have that quality where the dark parts of the world, because you feel so deeply, tend to stick out to you. more so than the light parts of the world. And so much so that you can actually convince yourself that the world doesn't have good in it anymore, right? But this is the message coming through for all of us right now, is that's not the case. It's only the case if we decide to do that to ourselves and force ourselves to stare at that. We have to intentionally find the beauty, right? Find the flow, right? Like it would show you in the movie Soul, where you get lost in time. You forget the passage of time. You forget that it even exists. Or maybe you see the truth that it doesn't exist. Something like that, right? Let me read some of these comments here real quick, guys. Kel says, feeling very isolated, alone in these points of views until I came to this life. Thank you, Kel. I appreciate that. And I'm glad you're here. That's the whole point. That's my whole intent. And that really does a lot for me, you saying that, to encourage me to continue to do this. Because this is, like I said, very nerve-wracking for me. I do channel messages all the time, but this is the first time I've done it, just purely that. And so thank you for your support in that comment. I appreciate you. User says, I feel like this is an attack. Me breaking down in the doctor's office today over past trauma. Definitely not trying to attack you, for sure, user. And if I understand why it could feel that way, because oftentimes these kind of truths, when you hear them, it can make you feel like you're being pointed out. That's not my intent by any means. I'm saying things that I apply to myself. That's the only reason I say them. Right. So if they resonate with you or anybody else that's watching right now, if that feels like something that's true for you, or if that calls out something in you, then it's for you. Right. That's why I share it with you. But I appreciate you saying that, because saying the part, I feel like this is an attack, because the way that it comes off often when I say these things, it will feel that way. Right. And if you don't believe me, I promise you, just continue to listen, because there'll be something that, oh shit, right? And I might not say something you like. And I just want you to know that if I do that, that's not my intent, right? My intent is not to make you feel angry or discouraged or anything like that. My intent is to tell you the truth. That's it. I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't really care how that makes you feel, as long as it brings you to your truth. Does that make sense? Because that will be the best version of you. And now that's something that's a harsh message and not everybody kind of resonates with. But I do think the only reason that's necessary, that kind of radical truth, like I'm going to say it, is because it's being drowned out modern day. We've not only drowned out, it's not like a conspiracy. This is something that we've done to ourselves. We've lost our ability to look at truth, to see what's real. And to feel what's real. We've forgotten that we're intuitive beings that knows when we're being lied to, right? Well, how do we know when we're being lied to? Because we question what's being said. If you question what's being said, you know it's not true. Things that are true, when it's said, when it's heard, it's beautiful. There's not a part of you that will question it. That's how you know it's true. That is part of your intuitive sense, sitting there saying, yep, passes the check, it passes the test. The problem is there's so much untruth in our world. And this is partially why the message of staring at the darkness is there, right? There's so much of it that's the norm. So we've been taught, because it's very painful to look at everything as untrue, to shut off that side of ourselves, that feeling side of ourselves that says, hey, is somebody lying to me, right? And the even darker side of that is we start to degrade ourselves when we do that. As if we stop trying to figure out what's true outside of ourselves, we'll lose it inside of ourselves. We won't be able to remember who we are eventually. You know, and I do think that this is what's slowly happened to our society, our world, is we've lost ourselves. And this is not a criticism, right? This is something that's happened to all of us individually. You know, and it's not your fault in that way. It's a generational problem. It's a human problem. It's all of our fault, right? So that's why we all worked on it together as a human collective. But thank you for that comment, user. Part of the reason why I'm not doing the book club anymore is because we were reading Nietzsche, right? We were reading Nietzsche, Human All Too Human, and you know, that's a very good example of truth and how radical it can get and how aggressive it can get and uncomfortable. And that I was just hearing this today very, very clearly that, you know, one of the lessons of figures like Nietzsche, when we look at them, is not only the brilliance of their mind, right? The brilliance and the courage that they had to speak kind of truths that really could have reflected on them very badly and did at times, is that these figures have a tragic nature to them. That these ideas, like I was saying, have a stickiness to them. And that while it's important to enunciate all truth, when you see it, if you're not careful, you can get addicted to trying to find all of it in the way that Nietzsche did. And I promise you, there are truths you don't want to find in that way. There's truths you didn't come here to find, but you can find if you look for them. And those are the things, there's certain things that can unseat you or cause you more pain than is necessary, right? Like I said, that part of the world exists. You can always find it. If you search for it, it'll always be there, right? But the same is true for the other side of life. And this is what I've been reminded of. And this is what I'm here to remind you of as well, is that other side is just as true. It propagates in exactly the same way. It washes away in a reverse to the stickiness of the darkness, right? It's a perfect balance. We're the thing that chooses. We often confuse our ability to control this world, right? Oftentimes, this is what causes the biggest villains in our world, is confusing that a little too much. But if we really want to simplify it, make it easier on ourselves, at least for me, this is what's made it easier for me. The one thing you control, and I think it really is only one thing, that you can prove is your choice. That's it. What does that feel like? What does that look like? That can be more complicated. You know, internally, conceptually, basically it means you're just the thing sitting there saying, You're not even the thing talking. You're not even the thing, just ideas going, no. You're the thing choosing whether you're accepting the idea or not, right? That's a different way of thinking about what you do as an individual. The reason I give it to you or share it with you, if you've never kind of thought of it that way, is because it will free you from the burden of feeling like you have to do everything, right? You can simplify it down, even to, do I want to accept this idea or that one? Sometimes we can't even figure that out. What do I believe in that way? Asking that question will lead us back to turning on that intuitive side of ourselves. You can only figure out what you believe one way, by feeling it. You got to feel it, right? So we get back to asking that question, and eventually we'll get thirsty for, damn it, what do I actually think is true? Not what this person tells me is true, or even what I've argued for most of my life. What do I actually feel is true? So much so that I would die for it, right? That's the foundation of belief, right? It's the hill you will die on, right? Not that you ever should have to. To keep it lighter. Thank you, Lady Starlight. Thank you very much. I love the earth. Thank you. Now let me get some more comments here. I'm really glad it's resonating with you guys. Thank you. I am not an Aquarius, actually, Mimi. Thank you for asking that. I'm an Aries. I'm an Aries, Leo, Libra. Those are my big three, right? So I got a lot of fire in me, but fire and a little bit of air there too. So I'm usually ablaze. I got to do a lot of work to cool myself down to bring me down to earth usually, but yeah, that's me. I usually don't have a problem with taking the first step. You know, I'm usually the first one to take the step. I'm the one that takes too many first steps, jump ships too quick. You know what I mean? I like new beginnings a little bit too much. Thank you, El Diddy. I appreciate you. Thank you, Jane, for that. I appreciate you. Absolutely, lady. I wish more people had these conversations too. You know, I think that's why I started off this live kind of talking a little bit about that, what I was trying to do here and explaining the difference between kind of what we think about channeled messages being and the way they're kind of presented commonly. what I'm trying to get to is, and I do not think anybody intends this, right? Anybody that brings channeled messages, there's a certain tendency, because I felt it coming on here before I did it right now, where you'll want to embellish it a little bit, could kind of act like, make it seem like there's a deeper conversation going on than is actually what's happening, because what's actually happening is you just being you. And when you're being authentic, something comes through you, but it doesn't present itself, at least for me, usually like a different conversation. Now, I'm not saying that's how it happens for everybody. It can, right? So this is why I say I'm not refuting it. But I think there's a problem in the way that people engage with it, right? So like, the one, forgive me for not remembering the name, but one of the ladies on here was asking, about, or kind of suggested about being able to get a message from a specific individual. And while, like I said, I have had that happen for actually so profoundly that it's one of the most profound experiences I've ever had. It's one of the things that made me recognize that I can do this, right? It doesn't happen when I choose it. I've never been able to figure out how I initiate that, which is partially why it's confused me when I see other people doing it, right? Because, like I said, I'm not denying that exists, that you can do it, but I don't know how they do it, right? Because it'll happen. Messages come through when they're supposed to. You'll be in front of me if you're supposed to. You'll hear what you're supposed to hear if it's your message, right? But otherwise you won't. It won't be for you, or it won't resonate with you. And so, I don't know. I believe if we demystify a little bit of what it feels like, the process of being able to channel, it will help a lot of other people in the world that, could benefit from recognizing this is a true process, to engage with it without feeling crazy, if that makes sense, right? Because I mean it. Like, you are a psychic being. I promise you this. Right. And you have your whole life experienced things that you've said were coincidence that are not. How do I know that? Because I know coincidence is the invented word. We created that. Matter of fact, that's a really, really modern creation. Ask yourself every time throughout your life, because everybody has different examples of this, right? Those moments in your life when you felt that deja vu feeling, that things got a little bit shifty for a moment. There's an excitement to it. Maybe you've seen something in the sky. Maybe you've seen a UFO, or maybe you've experienced a ghost, or maybe you thought you had, or you've had something weird happen like that. In that moment, if you go back there, if you're honest with yourself, ask yourself what you told yourself when it happened. The initial thing will be, oh shit, did that just happen? Did that just really happen? And you'll feel there's an excitement to it. There's a natural excitement to it. Did that just really happen? And the reason it's exciting is because there's something true about it. There's something to believe in it again. The world isn't dead anymore, if that's true. But what you'll immediately do, because of all of that possibility, that demands a lot of you. If that's going to be true, basically everything else isn't, so the whole world has to crumble. That's a massive change being presented all at once. So what we usually do is say, is there any other way we could explain that? That wouldn't demand we change in all of these ways? It was a coincidence. And we'll say that first, because it's easier. It is easier to do that. And we don't often say that. Right? We don't recognize that conceptually it's easier to say it's a coincidence than it is to recognize there might be something deeper going on. This is something that the scientific world, the secular world, doesn't readily admit, that it's a cop-out conceptually to say something's a coincidence. What you're writing it off to a divine power that you say doesn't exist. Maybe you're not saying it's a divine power, but you're writing it off to some kind of intricacy that's so great that we would never be able to understand it. I label that as divine, even if you don't. Right? So it's something like that, right? There's a misunderstanding of what's going on. Thank you, Lady Starlight. I appreciate it. I'm getting sassy when I say that. I don't mean to, but we can drink of water. Oh boy. I tend to do that too. So I tend to get sassy and passionate at certain times, depending on what wants to come through. For any of you that are interested in the channel side of it, right? I do work with specific things usually, but what I tend to have come through more often than not is usually ascended masters, right? So, I tend to work with a lot of more secular figures, which is partially why when I get more passionate when I talk about science in the secular world, because the figures that come through to me, many of the popular ones like Einstein and Tesla and these kind of people that were presented as non-believing beings, things that were just very logical, robotic almost things, were not that, and were misrepresented very deeply in that. Not only them, like I said, those two individuals, but most of the radical, grand thinkers in our society throughout history have been doing it in the exact same way, a deeply, deeply spiritually based way that was not at the very best, not properly retold throughout history, right? So that what I tend to have happen is a lot of those kind of figures come through. I say that because many people don't think that like figures like Newton and Tesla and these kind of figures would come through in a spiritual channeled session because they were secular figures. You know what I mean? Like if they didn't really believe in that, why would they have? But that's why I explain it, because I think they were misrepresented. So 32 viewers, 33, absolutely, El Diddy. 33 in the room. I'm way behind, but thank you for pointing that stuff out. I appreciate you guys putting that in there. Absolutely. Let me catch up here a little bit so I'm in line with the conversation. Cynthia says the spiritual darkness is beautiful. Absolutely, Cynthia. That's it's a very hard truth to describe properly and enunciate, but that there's a beauty, like partially this is the best way to put it. This is the way I like to put it, is that the darkness in our world is the contrast that sets up the picture of our lives, basically, right? So it's the photo negative of the picture. If you didn't have that, you wouldn't have the definition of any of the picture, right? You could still have the color there, but it would look like you wouldn't know where the color was supposed to go, right? And so that's kind of how I like to think about the darkness, is there's a beauty to it, but that's what it is. It's a beauty in relation to everything it creates by being there. Right. And so it's a negative beauty. Right. And you'll notice this in your own life through your trauma, that as you heal from your traumas, the thing that was initially the biggest and always will be one of the biggest torments and pains of your life, all of a sudden, as you heal, that becomes the thing that you stand on that makes you stronger, that defines basically who you are moving forward. You find out that like the pains and the traumas in your life were like actually part of the map of your life, right? Defining exactly what path you were going to take, that would outline exactly what qualities you would take on and exactly how strong you would get to do exactly what you were supposed to do in the end, if you allow that process to happen. The problem is we don't allow that to happen. We try to yank the wheel, right? Steer the damn car. And so the universe can't do much about that. We're the ones that choose, right? So they can set up the path, but if we don't follow the path, then again, there's not much we can do. And I think that's part of the message coming through modern day as well, is we're not off course as much as we like to think we are. Not that we like to think that, but the adjustment we need is simply, it's simpler than we like to think. It's just a certain type of radical honesty that really does have a way of shifting things more rapidly than we have conceived of, right? So the world can improve rapidly in ways that we haven't been able to recognize yet because we haven't applied these principles yet. Good evening, Frankie. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you. Thanks for being a subscriber. Let's see here. Lady Starlight says, I've had a struggle with listening to the music I love, but now that my eyes, I see the dark in it. Yeah. You can find that too, that at different points in your life, you may go through different phases of music and you may not be able to listen to certain music for huge portions of your life. Absolutely. Or maybe not just music. You'll be cut off from whole sections of yourself sometimes for part of your life. And that can be incredibly painful. That's one of the most painful things you'll ever have happen to you, is losing part of yourself or all of yourself like that. But the reason that happens is this kind of development, this recognition of what you are. It sounds almost needless. Thank you, Lady Starlight, and pointless, but it's not. You have to lose yourself to remember yourself, something like that, right? Because there's some kind of forgetting that's default to this experience. Like we're born and we forget. We don't know what's happening as soon as we come out. So we're always trying to figure out what the hell is happening. And the best way we can remember what we actually were, our whole point, our intent when we came here, was through kind of losing that thing, through trying to be something else. Because while you may not remember what you are, you will know what it feels like to be something you aren't. We all know what that feels like. To be forced to be something we aren't, or to choose, maybe even worse, intentionally to push our truth down. Thank you, Lady Starlight. To intentionally push that down and to push out something that's inauthentic, full well knowing that's what we're doing. We've all done that before. I've done that before. It's some of the things that is the hardest to recognize, that we, more often than not, are not being denied by other people. Maybe we are, but that's not how it started. No, we deny ourselves. We're the ones that do that. There's nobody else out there to blame. Truly. That leads to one place. The blame game leads to one place, and it's not pleasant for anybody involved. It never gets resolved. There's no justice in the blame game. Whoever's bringing that through, I like the... Anyway, Skyflow says impossible to be manipulated if you observe thoughts and emotions rather than be entangled in the same emotions the manipulator expects you to be entangled in. Yeah, very well said. Absolutely. And I think the easiest way to do that is, like I said, it's very simple. It's not because people are often playing games with you. Sometimes they're not even recognizing, like you're saying. Sometimes there's intentional manipulators, narcissists that know they're doing that and are trying to get something out of you. Those exist. But more often what we'll encounter in the world are people that are doing that but don't know they're doing that. The reason they're doing that, the reason they're trying to manipulate you is because they don't feel good about themselves. Right? They're trying to get a certain type of validation. And there's something that you're doing that is invalidating them in the moment, the lie that they're telling. So it triggers a certain egotism inside, a certain natural narcissism that's built into all of us that then says, I need to attack that thing. I need to demote that thing down to the level I'm at so that it's no longer a threat. It's almost a self-preservation mechanism. So, the reason I say that is because we have to have compassion for the people in our world, right? There are villains in the world, but what I would say is they don't think of themselves that way. And it is one of the deepest lessons we can learn is not nobody. And I mean nobody, even the biggest villains in the world didn't get there by thinking that. And they're not trying to be that. That's not how they become a villain, right? There's one type of villain that we could classify that way. You see him in the Batman. It's called the Joker, right? He's a conception that's linked very deeply to the devil, right? This is an idea of the ultimate evil, something that wants destruction for destruction's sake. There's a reason why that's something that terrifies us. And there's a reason why it's something that we don't see very often, right? Because it's something that's very rare, and it's something that if it was the norm, there wouldn't be anything, right? So by definition, the biggest monsters in our world are very, very, very rare. Right? So we do ourselves a disservice if we construct a world in which there's a lot of those, because it's not true. What's more true, and this is something that Nietzsche says, actually, this is why I'm speaking about it. He says it more aggressively, but it's really important to recognize that the difference between the perspective of the victim and the perspective of the perpetrator, right? That never, and I mean never, does the victim ever understand why the perpetrator is doing it when it's happening. They project a certain type of villainry on the person, right? That they're doing it because they want that kind of power, that kind of feeling of whatever, right? But like Nietzsche says, if you reverse that too, the perpetrator often, the reason they're able to do the cruelty they're doing to the person is because they're not empathizing with the other person. That's why they're doing it. They literally can't in that moment understand what it feels like to be on the other end of what they're doing. That's why they're enabling it. That's why they continue to do it. So there's something true in that, right? And the reason I explain that is because we can do a whole lot of forgiving by recognizing that truth in this world. It's a two-way street. We have to forgive the villains in our lives that we've constructed in order to forgive ourselves, in order to expect the people that we would expect that from to forgive us, right? It's a process that we choose. And I think this is something we're all being asked to do, is be very radically honest about, the people that we're surrounded with, the narratives that are being spread, and the way people are being villainized. Everybody, and I mean everybody, no matter what your political leaning is, no matter what you believe in religiously or spiritually, that there are very, 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 very few devils in the way that we conceive of them. So be careful who you label as that, right? And also, more so, if we can figure out a way to understand why, the villains in our lives actually did what they did, how they actually were able to allow themselves to do that to us, how they convinced themselves and justified it, we'll actually be able to protect ourselves from becoming that. And this is a very, 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 very heavy message for somebody, whoever's listening right now. This is coming through. It's going to hit hard. Okay. But, and I mean, every time, the way the villain becomes the villain is by being the victim. It's the same cycle, different parts of the same cycle. Okay? Whatever you were hurt with, whatever that torment is, if you don't figure out a way to heal it, you heal it, the path ends with you being the villain. Not just anyone, the same one. And I mean that. This is why it's important for us to do this work. This is why it's important for us to be reasonable about the people that we see in our world. Thank you so much for that comment, Skyflow. I hope, just triggered that message. So thank you for saying that, but not directed at you by any means. I hope you know that. Thank you for being here. Anyway, very powerful message for anybody that's watching here. It can really help liberate you to recognize that, even though it's a hard one to recognize. It's helped me before. Do I channel archangels? Yes. I tend to work with Michael the most. Michael's on my arm. Michael and Gabriel and Raphael tend to be the angels that work with me the most, but I've worked with Metatron before too. I've never done it for somebody else. So I've never channeled in for somebody else and through like a question before, through an archangel. I have done messages from passed on loved ones before, for people. So just to kind of give you some clarity. Yeah. There's definitely an archangel coming through right now. Oftentimes Michael comes through in times you wouldn't recognize. He is a protector, right? And one of the ways he protects is with truth, the flaming sword, right? So that's why I say that's one that I work with often, because often when I'm channeling, if I get passionate, what's coming through is Michael. Right. Especially if it's talking about some kind of radical truth, specifically a truth that will heal you, right? A truth that will cut away the things that are untrue, right? You'll know when you're feeling that kind of it because you'll feel it. You'll be like, why did it? You won't be able to not see it, kind of a thing, right? Another thing about archangel energy is it's an energy you can really feel when they're there. That it's a more tangible experience than I think people recognize. My awakening experience in some ways kicked off with what I would describe as a visitation from Gabriel. And I mean a visitation, not in the way I saw the angel Gabriel, but I had an experience of kind of an overwhelming experience in the middle of a very dark place when I was by myself alone and very depressed and begging for answers, right? at the end of my rope, when I had this very deep religious experience. And you will, at times, have what I would describe as voices that are louder than other voices in your head. They'll come through like thunder. You won't be able to mistake them. It's not your voice. It may sound like your voice, but it has a presence to it that's different. That's what I would describe archangel energy when you hear it to sound like. Another quality that I would say or describe, and the reason I'm describing it is because you can experience this, right? There's no hierarchy of, hey, you need to do something first before I'll talk to you. No, just believe in it. That's it. And they're there. Right? It's a part of you already. It's not about them being outside of you. It's you, just a different archetypal aspect of you that we aren't recognizing. So I say this, we can all channel the archangels, right? But there will be specific archangels, if you study them, that will resonate with you more. For instance, Michael is it's like they pick you kind of a thing. Michael, I got this tattoo when I joined the military because my best friend's mom gave me a medallion of St. Michael as a protector of soldiers. I didn't understand the significance. I wasn't deeply spiritual at the time. I just got it tattooed on me. And then later on, after a decade or so of going through crazy shit and then waking up, I realized and recognized that Michael was very deeply related to my journey, for me specifically, right? But it's different for everybody. So the book that I held up is Nietzsche's Human, All Too Human. This is actually one of the books that I was doing in the live book club. So anybody that has seen me on here before with the book club, we didn't finish it. We're about halfway through. One of the reasons I stopped the live book club is because of the energy. The philosophy is very heavy sometimes, especially when we're dealing with Nietzsche. And I was having a hard time maintaining energy and momentum in daily lives when we're engaging with such heavy topics over and over again. You know what I mean? One after another. So that was one of the energies that came through today for me, was that we need to shift that up. And that if Nietzsche wants to talk, he'll come through and let me know, hey, open the book. I want to say something. This is how they come through usually. So let's see. I guess he wants to say something. He just said something, didn't he? Let's see. 461. It was on page 220. I opened up to page 220 and looked at 461. Prince and God. Men often deal with their princes in a similar way as with their God, since after all the prince was often God's representative, or at least his high priest. This almost uncanny feeling of reverence and fear and shame had and has become much weaker, but sometimes it flares up and attaches to powerful people generally. Worship of the genius is an echo of this reverence for gods and princes. Wherever one endeavors to elevate individual men to the superhuman, the tendency also exists to imagine whole classes of people as rougher and more base than they really are. That's a powerful message coming through there. It speaks of our ability to. The reason that we are able to debase people is actually because we place other people, including ourselves, on pedestals. Oddly enough, and that's a profound truth, right? Something that we don't usually recognize. But one of the reasons why I like to read Nietzsche, he'll hit you with certain kind of different ways of thinking about the world that you've never really thought of before, that really have a way of shifting your perspective on it, and can oftentimes unlock certain things, different, it can unlock a worldview that you didn't know was there. At least it has for me sometimes. So it's a little example of some of the stuff that Nietzsche has in there. Yeah. Cynthia says, there is a way, and I find that it's the peaceful path within. The Buddha was showing this to us. Absolutely, Cynthia. You'll find it in these different characters. They're very similar characters. The Buddha and Jesus are very, very similar individuals, right? I mean, when you look at the qualities and the things that they taught, the things that they say. Matter of fact, it's very controversial, but there's a belief that Jesus, he's not covered. The life of Jesus isn't covered from age of about 11 or 12 through age 32, I believe, actually, when he comes on the scene in the New Testament. And there's been a lot of debate about what was happening in his life during that period of time. But one of the theories is that he actually was traveling and going to different places, including the East, where he learned some of the Eastern traditions, like the Buddhist traditions, which is obviously you'd understand why that wouldn't be popular in the Bible, why it wouldn't be included in that. But for me, it makes sense when you look at the way that the figure taught and talked and how radically different it was from the Jewish tradition, that he was oftentimes honestly criticizing in ways, which is partially why he was killed, right? So there's this, you'll find it's the same figure. It's the same quality. What those figures are representing is authenticity. Christ energy is an energy. It's a bifurcated energy that you can experience, right? The best way to describe what it is it's you. But it's just you. Nothing else. That's what Christ was. That's what Buddha is, right? That's what a Buddha is, right? Is an authentic person, but so wholly authentic, there isn't anything that isn't them about them. Nothing, right? That's magic. That literally is what magic's made of, right? And so, not only is it magic, it's healing, right? That's how Jesus was able to heal, right? That's why many of the Eastern philosophies believe in this holistic healing and speak of it in this way, that you can heal yourself. And I believe this as well. So thank you for that comment, but it's very interesting. I do believe that there's similarities in all of these different figures, and you really can, part of what we're all being called to do is recognize the value in all of these different traditions, regardless of where they come through in history, finding those similarities where the Venn diagram overlays and appreciating, valuing those things, raising them up, right? So that we can kind of start to bring down some of those differences. I was trying to figure out why Nietzsche said that, but this is why, right? He's, princes, when we raise princes to gods, right? It's all fine and good until we start to actually believe that it's a god prince, until we actually believe Xerxes is really a human god, right? In 300. If we cross over that, then we'll actually start to believe, we're drinking our own Kool-Aid. We'll believe that the other people, other human beings in the world are less valuable, right? And we'll justify, like I said, in the ways, we'll be able to justify doing horrendous things to them, which is how people justify doing it, right? It's just a different way of understanding villainry in the world. But the reason why it's so liberating and so important to understand is because it's something that will save you from becoming that. It's actually the only way I believe you save yourself from tripping into becoming that accidentally. It's very addictive, we like to, as modern human beings, we ascribe ourselves too much credit in terms of our ability to hold back from the tendencies all human beings had for all of human history, the logical fallacies that we told ourselves and tripped into, right? Human beings have a tendency to gratify and glorify things that are not divine, right? This is why the message in, Moses comes down off of the mountain, Mount Sinai, with the 10 Commandments and immediately smashes them because they're worshiping a calf, right? A golden calf. After he's just told them, have no other idols besides God, right? And so it's basically that story encapsulated. Like, man, even when you tell human beings, don't do this, matter of fact, when you say don't do this, what do? They do this, and they do this, and they do this. This is actually, I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here, but this is one of the things that I found interesting, and one of the only parts of, I say this because I do believe that everything is meant to be questioned, right? Your belief is there for a reason. Your curiosity and adventurous spirit is there for a reason as well. If there's something in even an old religion that you don't understand or you think doesn't make sense or is out of place, question it. It'll lead you somewhere, maybe to some new insight. One of the things I've never understood, this is a practical problem, is why, and I'm not saying it didn't exist, I'm just genuinely asking the question, why an omniscient being, right? An all-knowing thing that created everything, including human beings, also free will, which is why all this shit's happening. I understand that, right? If you wanted to keep them from doing something, why would you tell them not to do it? It's like the pink elephant problem. It really is. It's like, if you don't want somebody to think of a pink elephant, you don't tell them about a pink elephant. You don't say pink elephant. It's the easiest way to get them to stop thinking about it. But if you say stop thinking about the pink elephant, bam, they're thinking about pink elephants, right? Apply that to the idea of the 10 Commandments, and it makes a little less sense practically. Thou shalt not kill. Well, why? Thanks, Rufus, right? Thank you very much for that. That's exactly what happens immediately. What does a child do? If you're parents out there, what do? Tell them not to do something. What do? They'll either ask why or they'll do it anyway. If you don't have a question or an answer for why, they'll do it anyway. A better strategy, at least from a parent's perspective, usually is to explain exactly, not to tell them not to do it, just to say, if you continue to do what you're doing right there, this is what will happen. This will happen. Continue to do that. And yes, they may continue to do that, but they will recognize as soon as that thing happens, that was true. Right? What ends up happening with the 10 Commandments is a certain type of dog chasing the tail kind of a thing, where we're trying to keep ourselves from doing something because we're saying don't do something. But if we stop saying don't do something, we'd recognize if we ever did it, we wouldn't want to do it. You know what I mean? The reason it says don't murder somebody, don't kill somebody, is because when you do that, your life gets worse, not just theirs. Not only your life, the whole world gets worse, not just theirs. If you don't believe me, don't, right? But you get the concept. Don't test that. But this is the idea. And so there's certain ways in which when we speak, when we're honest with ourselves, we're not going to agree with everything. There's going to be things that you see that you want to say that may be radical, that may not align with what's popular to say, that could even be classified as something that's dangerous to say, especially in the times that we're living in now, where more and more things seem to be classified as dangerous to say, right? There's so many dangerous words now. I never knew we could do that many dangerous words. Anyway, you get the point. For some reason that wanted to come through. Speak your truth, no matter what it is. If you believe in it, say it. Let me get caught up here, guys. Thank you for all the comments and all the support. I really appreciate you. This has been fantastic. I'm probably going to stay on here for a couple more minutes, try to catch up on some comments, and then I'm probably going to sign off because to be quite honest, I was pretty tired before I came on here. I wasn't even sure if I was going to continue to do it, but it's been really fun and it went really well. So, like I said, this is going to be a regular thing, and it won't always be as intense of energy as it is tonight, because it is a full moon. But this will be for the most part, nightly thing. Just check back on my page or follow me and check back on my page, and you'll see the event posted there if there is going to be one for the night. So, absolutely, Lady Starlight. Thank you so much for all of your support and all of your gifts. I really appreciate you. Thank you. Tanya, a reading. I'm not really doing readings right now, Tanya. I will be doing those soon. Because the reason I'm not going to do them right now is because the only way I would go about doing it would be probably through pulling tarot cards, and I don't usually like to do it that way because it comes off a little impersonal when I do it that way. I'm going to be setting up channeled messages one-on-one like this very soon through my link tree, which is on this page. They're not on there yet, but you'll be able to book a reading through me, with me through there, right? And that's what I would recommend moving forward, specifically because if we were to do it in a public setting like this, it's not going to be as pointed. It's not going to be the reading you want because it's going to be a mixture of energies, everybody else that's in here too. That's just the way it works for me. It may not be for everybody else. Some people can do that, but that's just kind of how it works for me. It gets confusing if I try to do something individual like that with a bunch of people in the room. So... but I'll let you guys know and check back on my link tree for you'll be able to schedule it through there. So you can schedule a reading through there. It'll be a channeled message reading. So basically like this, except it'll just be you and me and we'll be talking. So I hope that's sounds good. Charlie Grow. Yes, I am a medium. Let's see here. Yeah, absolutely. We have to affirm who we are continuously. Candace says, hi, Chris. Are we supposed to just be asking random questions? You can ask whatever you'd like, Candace, for sure. If something comes through, oftentimes, as you guys have probably seen on here, people will leave questions with no intent of a message coming through, and then something will come through based on the question that they leave. So I encourage people to just kind of leave whatever hits them as what they want to ask, even if it's something that doesn't make sense or isn't really relevant, just throw it in there. And if I come across it and something comes through, I'll share it with the group. Alrighty? Let's see. It's interesting, Cynthia, you said Gabriel, the archangel of the birth of our Christ consciousness. I've never heard it referred to as that before. I've always heard Gabriel referred to as the messenger, but that is precisely the way in which it came through for me. So if that's something you've experienced, that's interesting. That's maybe a role I haven't recognized for Gabriel yet. But he does seem to initiate. He seems to be around when you are being initiated or that process is being started. He kind of brings the message of, hey, time to wake up, right? So if any of you are or have experienced something like that, or a very powerful experience with Gabriel, that could be why. It seems like Gabriel tends to bring or usher in that Christ consciousness, or the development of it brings that message. Uriel, I know of Uriel. I'm not familiar with Uriel and like his qualities specifically. But I have had Uriel come through before. It's been quite a while. It's been about a year or so. Last time I remember having Uriel come through. Yes, Lori. So if we have things to release for the new moon, should they be released tonight? If you feel called to it, there's different ways you can do that. The easiest way to do it is to just put that intention out. You can make that more solid in the world by like writing it down if you want to. That's one of the most effective ways to do it. And I mean, it'll really work. So whatever you write down, right? If you, on a full moon, if you go out with the intent to release something, if you write that down, especially if you work with the elements, so bring in any element, you can bring in fire, you can bring in water, you can bring in earth, any of those together combined with the energy of the full moon will help you create that kind of healing environment. It'll help you cleanse yourself. It's almost like amplifying the energy is the best way to describe it. It amplifies the energy of your intention when you do that. So yes, now that's obviously that's going to be a more, what's the right way to put it? I don't know why I can't think of the way to put it. There's different modalities you can use, methods you can use. If you're more of the Western Christian interpretation, if that kind of turns you off working with the elements, the more polytheistic way of looking at things, you can do the exact same thing through just fundamental prayer, right? Working with whatever deity. If you do pray to Jesus Christ, you can pray to Jesus Christ with the same intent, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. But doing it on the night and then with whatever modality is comfortable for you will be the best way to manifest the healing you're looking for. So I hope that helps. Sorry, Candace, I'm not following the question. You said, so if they have to pick you, what do unlucky people do? I'm not following the question. I'm sorry. I would answer it if I did. Absolutely, Kylie. No worries. Yeah, Kylie, I heard he went to India too. I heard he went to a bunch of different places, basically all of the different fundamental, like the traditions. Like I heard he traveled and learned the Hindu tradition and the Buddhist tradition, and even some of the more, like I said, older polytheistic traditions, like the more shamanistic traditions, and then brought those back. Because that's what my awakening process has been, it's been like a 10-year journey of going and figuring out what I believe through engaging with these different religions. And what I've found is they all, in some way, at some level, will tell you the same thing, right? They do have the same fundamental process going on, but it's like the language they use to get you there is different. And that makes a lot of sense, because they developed in different places with different languages, different cultures. So it's like literally for the way I see it, all of the religions is just a different language describing the exact same thing, right? Now that many people would say, but there's some that have, like Hinduism can have hundreds of thousands of gods, and you have, monotheism with Christianity in the Western world. How do those two things square? Well, you have to bring in the archangels as well. We like to think of the Western traditions as monotheistic religions, and that is true when we say there's one divine God, but there's other divine angels in that pantheon, beings in that pantheon, many of them actually. So what you'll find is if you look in the Christian tradition at the angels, the pantheon of angels, especially the archangels, and you cross-reference those with the main gods of the polytheistic traditions, you'll find it's the same qualities. Same gods, different names. They also match up with all of the planets, right? You can do it throughout history. It's fascinating. So what we find is everybody's interfacing with the same thing, obviously. They're just using different words to describe what it is. But when they're describing it as the same quality, which means they must all be seeing the same thing. Right. I do think this is what Jesus found. If he did, go on this kind of journey, I'm sure that's what he came to discover is that this is all the same thing. It's the truth. And the fundamental truth is that just be you. Stop pretending. You know what I mean? And that it's not as serious in that way. That's why you laugh when I say that, because it's not as serious as we like to think. It's the most serious thing you'll ever do, but it's not as serious as we take it. You know what I mean? So I hope that helps too. Lighten the mood a little bit, right? Thank you for the follows, guys. I appreciate you. Absolutely, Kylie. Christ consciousness is within us all. It's something that is bifurcated, right? That's why in the Bible, Jesus shows himself to the different apostles and stuff after he rises, right? It's meant to represent that Jesus is now a part of all of these different individuals that shared life with him, shared the Last Supper with him. You can see this represented very, very well in the Chosen series. If anybody watched the Chosen series, you can find it pretty much anywhere right now. I think it's free most places, but brilliant series, really well done. And you can see at the end of the first season, they have this flashback where it goes from kind of middle of Jesus's, journey with the apostles to after his death, where I forget what apostle it is. It might be John or whoever wrote the Bible, consolidated it, is sitting there trying to figure out how to start the Bible. And he's like in this, and they do it so well because it's this scene where he's by himself and it's very human. It's not like this magic thing. He's like, what the hell am I supposed to say? You can tell Jesus isn't there. Dude's dead. And he doesn't know how the hell he's supposed to continue on teaching what this guy taught him. Right. And he's sitting there trying to figure out what he's supposed to say. And then in the moment, like the lightning strikes outside and it starts to rain. And he just starts to write. He starts to speak. And when he starts to speak, you can hear, it's like they took both voices and layered them over. It's Jesus in him saying that. And all it took for him to channel that was, like I said, him just ask, like, what am I supposed to do? And then it's there, right? I never left you. I'm always here. That kind of message coming through. So it's us purely and authentically. When we speak our true authentic desires into the world, what comes next, that's Christ consciousness, right? Or the thing doing that is Christ consciousness, more accurately. What comes next and the thing doing it is Christ. And that's everybody when they want to be, which is beautiful. You know what I mean? There's no limiting factor to that. The only thing that limits you from being the same thing is your capacity for telling the truth, right? Which is why it's been built into our societies for so long, why we raise our children to tell the truth, or we have up until this point. But why our society and our economy is very confusing and backwards, because it seems to incentivize people being deceptive. This is why it's a problem, because it turns off the Christ consciousness inside of everybody. You won't allow it to be there. Thank you, Artistic. I appreciate you. It can't be there because everybody's habitually saying something that isn't true. Well, worse yet, the world is telling them they're telling the truth. So the world is gaslighting them into doing that, right? Stealing their choice. That's a tragedy. It's a certain type of slavery that isn't being enunciated, to be quite honest, that I do believe is the reason why Christ consciousness is coming alive right now. This energy This type of energy has not just been there for Christ. It came before that in the Bible too. You see it embodied in the figure of Moses, specifically when Moses goes to the Egyptians and demands that he lets his people go out of slavery, right? Well, God's people is not a specific group of people. God's people is anybody that is not being treated as free, right? It's all of God's people, but specifically the ones it pays attention to. I don't like using or gendering it. It pays attention to is the part of it that is suffering, that is being held back, is being held down. And modern day, that has grown to a massive proportion, specifically because of the way that gaslighting has been leveraged to steal people's choice on whether they can tell the truth or not. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not responsible for telling the truth or not. That's the insidious part of it. You're still responsible for what you're doing. But it doesn't let anybody in this world off the hook for being a part of that gaslighting that is going on. It's something that we're doing to ourselves, and we all have the responsibility to stop that through, how we raise our children, how we treat other people, how we treat ourselves, how we talk and interact with each other. We can model to the world what we expect by being honest. And I do believe that is the biggest message coming through tonight on this full moon for everybody that's watching. Be honest, right? Not just because it's the right thing to do. Thank you, Artistic, because I promise you it will make you feel better in exactly the way that you've been searching for forever, in everything else besides the truth, right? That's what it means, right? When it would say, don't look for things in anything else besides the truth, right? Don't try to find it out there. That's because it's not out there. The satisfaction isn't there. The thirst that we have inside as a modern thing is a thirst for truth, right? And you can give yourself that. You can quench that yourself. Nobody else is going to do it for you, as a matter of fact. I can promise you that. So, anyway, that's a powerful thing I want coming through. Good night, Candace. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. John 5:19 says Nettie. So Cynthia, it looks like Cynthia and Nettie, you guys are talking about different beliefs. Thank you, Renee. I appreciate it. This is an important one. I'm going to kind of point this out and talk about it a little bit because it's so important for us to speak what we believe is true, right? But often when we do that, we'll recognize that that isn't always going to be the same thing as what somebody else's version of it is. And this is important to explain, right? One of the reasons why truth is a hard thing in the world, why there's a big argument about facts in the world right now, about, and honestly, a lot of people trying to invalidate other truths in the world, is because I don't think we've defined what truth is, or the fact that it's multifaceted. The concept of truth is more complicated than we've actually admitted. Here's what I mean by this. And this has taken me a really long time to figure out. It seems simple, but it took me a decade to figure this out, right? Is that there's levels to truth. There's an individual truth, your subjective truth, we could say. And there's an objective truth in the world. Something that is overarchingly true, universally true. Right. And this has been identified, and philosophers have kind of said it, but just not in these same terms. Right. So there's the subjective truth is your lived experience. Right. There's a quality of your lived experience that can't be invalidated. So something happens to you, it will, create a certain conception of the world that while it may not work for everybody, it may not actually define the world properly for everybody in the world. It defines your world accurately based on what you experienced. And that is true to a certain degree, right? Like I said, not overarchingly true, but subjectively, that is very true. Now, the level of truth that we often operate at is that level of truth. In this individual sense, what truth fills out my world correctly, right? That's the truth we'll tell to other people. That's the truth that bounces against theirs too, because it's usually not the same. People, you tell me something that's true, I'm going to take it and say, okay, does it work in my world? If it doesn't work in my world, then I say it's not true. Boom, argument, right? We just explode into, well, how can two things be true at the same time? What we're looking for, and that's, excuse me for my nose is really itching right now. But a lot of energy coming through. What we're looking for is like a Venn diagram. The point is that conversation, the enunciation of your subjective truth. Because what will happen as we have that uncomfortable process happen, like, damn it, like, why are they saying that they believe that's true when it kind of invalidates what I'm saying? And then why am I saying something that they're saying couldn't happen? Well, that's kind of besides the point. What are you both saying that is true? What did you both experience in those scenarios that you agree about? That's the overarching truth. You find it slowly and in pieces, generationally, through accumulated lived experience. It's so true you can't disprove it. Why? Because it is true for every single person that has lived and can live moving forward, right? This is a different level. These are the different levels of truth we're operating at. So when I say speak truth, what I'm usually saying is that subjective truth is necessary for you to be confident enough in it to actually say it so clearly enough that we can use it and find the overlaps, right? We can see, we can get the kernel of brilliance out of it, right? Because everybody is brilliant. Everybody's perspective is valuable and it's there for a reason, right? So the point is not to invalidate or to disagree; it's to find where it overlaps. And so I hope that helps, especially because the conversation specifically. I think you guys are talking about the existence of Satan or the figure of Satan or the devil, right? And whether it's a literal figure or a mental construct or how it exists in your world specifically. And this is what I mean by it, right? We take that example specifically. It definitely is a mental construct. There's no way you can deny that. Right. There's a way in which it governs. It exists disembodied, regardless of whether you admit it's there or not. It's a part of the way we think. Right. But then there's also a level to it in which you can see the devil in people in the world. You can see the devil in organizations. You can see the devil in actions, in movies. Right. It can be embodied. It can be a lived physical thing, right? So there's a both are true to a certain level. What's the real truth? The qualities, right? Both of those things have similar qualities. They do similar things to people, to the world. It degrades the world. It makes it angry and bitter and resentful and isolated and ungrateful, right? Those are some of the qualities I could isolate. So that is the overarching truth. That's the archetypal devil, right? It's something that does that and only that. So we can, when we analyze, I think the reason I say it, when we analyze it from that level, we can just, I hope you can feel that, we can dispel the tension in the disagreement, right? Truly dispel it. That's what I think true justice is. It's not satisfaction. It's not victory. It's gone. That's balancing. You know what I mean? We're going all over the place with this. Another topic for another night. Anyway, let me catch up here. User 87 asks, any tips for how to heal past traumas and inner child? I'm going to get the music started here again, guys. Sorry, I forgot that. I usually wear headphones, but for some reason tonight with the channel messaging, I'm just doing it without it. But I want you guys to have the music in the background because it tends to set the tone. So how to heal past traumas and inner child. Well, they're both, I'm sure you've recognized at this point, they're intricately linked, right? That your past traumas, what I found actually is that the really significant past traumas matter. If you can go back to the first one that you can remember, usually what'll happen is we get paused developmentally at the age in which we were first deeply traumatized. Not completely all the time. If it's a deep enough trauma, it can, where it kind of freezes us developmentally there. But oftentimes what it does is in that venue, in the realm of development in which we were traumatized, it'll kind of freeze us there. And we'll get kind of stuck there. And we may continue to develop past that in other areas of our lives, but that part of us will feel kind of hindered in a way that it can't really fend for itself, kind of a thing. because it is kind of it is an injured version of your inner child, right? But the reason I say that is because, this is a very Jungian conception, right? But for at least the way that I've been able to help heal my trauma and my inner child is recognizing that my trauma, my shadow side, my shadow self is my inner child. And that was a really confusing thing for me to understand. The shadow side of you, the vicious side of you, the part that snaps and acts aggressively, that's your inner child. The reason it's hard to identify it as such is because we don't think about our inner child as something that's aggressive and violent, but we're not thinking of it in the proper context. It's not just any inner child. It's not a happy child sitting in there going, it's a traumatized child that's been forgotten for however old you are since then. Imagine what you would have done, take you at that age, and then sit you in a box and don't allow you to do anything but think about whatever trauma it was for that period of time. That's basically what we do to ourselves, to our inner child when we're traumatized and we don't heal from that. I'm not criticizing. We all end up doing this. It's very hard as a child to be able to do that for yourself. Anyway, so we get stuck there. And then as we grow up, we start to act in the ways in which we act uncontrollably are that inner child lashing out, trying to say, hey, I am not okay. I need help. But when you're not listening and we just keep going, what else is this child supposed to do? So it starts to get more radical. It starts to get more violent internally. So it'll start to make you feel nasty and bad. You'll start to have nasty thoughts in exactly the way that an immature child would. Right. And the reason I say this is so deeply true, guys. I mean it, because as you recognize this about yourself, it can help start to heal you, but you'll also start to see it in people, in the way they act. And it'll help explain to you why people act the way they do. Especially the people that act the harshest towards you, or the really mean and vicious, and you don't understand why. When you're like, why are you so mean? This is why. This is why. It's not, you're viewing them wrong. They're not an adult operating from a logical mind. What you are seeing is a deeply, 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 deeply damaged, abused, and neglected child screaming out for help. When you look at people that way, when they're in the middle of those moments, you'll cease to be angry at them. And you'll be able to have a little bit more compassion for who they are in that moment, right? Especially once you recognize yours. It'll make you want to cry. It makes me emotional right now because for anybody that is feeling this in this live right now, we are so brutally neglectful to ourselves in that way. Right? To where you're you, and it's not, I mean this, it is you inside of you that the only thing it can do to get your fucking attention is to be the nastiest thing in the world. That's the only thing it can figure out how to do is inside of you. It screams and it scratches. And I say this because I used to, when I started this journey, I would picture inside of myself, my shadow. Before I understood this, I would see it. And I could see this thing inside of me. And it was in pitch blackness, and there was like this spotlight, and it was this black, decrepit, twisted, nasty looking thing. And it would hide. It would crawl and cower, and I would berate it. I would scream at it. You're disgusting. I will rip you out of me. I mean, as violent as you could imagine, this is how I would be talking to myself, not recognizing I was talking to myself, thinking I'm trying to push out some part of me that isn't me or whatever. This is how we use it, because we don't want to recognize that it's our responsibility, this thing that we have with us. But it was me, that golem that I had made. That's what it looked like, was a golem inside of me, right? Sitting there terrified while I beat it and beat it and beat it and scream at it and push it down more and then wonder why I'm feeling bad about myself, right? This is a process that goes on, I think, inside of most people, which is why I describe it. It's not a fun thing to describe, and I hope it helps anybody watching. If you do that to yourself,
the easiest way to start on the path back from that is just recognizing that having compassion for yourself feels good. You can give yourself relief, right? And now slowly, over a period of years and years of deep trauma work, that's not there anymore. I can no longer find that conception of me internally. I can't see that anymore. Matter of fact, as I started to heal, and this is the deeper part of it, after we get past that point, we have to start reestablishing a relationship with that thing again, with who we really are. That's you. A lot of energy coming through right now. Just give me a second. Because this is a really, 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 really common trauma. This is one that happens to everybody, right? So I think everybody can resonate with this because generationally, one of the generational traumas for the human being is the idea of adult. What the fuck is the idea of adult? This idea that you need to grow up. It always means stop being something uncontrollable. Stop being something unpredictable. Stop being something creative. Be something responsible. Be something that I can depend on, right? In the ways that I can benefit and profit off of, right? This is a conception that needs to go away. The human being is. There's no adult version of the human being and child version. It just is. If we would stop trying to change ourselves as adults, if we would stop trying to change children into something else besides what they actually are, what they naturally are, we would have actual fucking human beings in the world, not pretend ones that walk around pretending to be adults, which is why they act like children, which is why we're confounded as adults stand on this stage and act like children, or leaders act like children. That's why, because they are, and it's not an insult, it's a fact. It's one that never should have been an insult because adult isn't a fucking thing. It's a conception. It's a lie. It is the lie. It's the fundamental ego lie of the modern world. You're a child. You want to play. That's all you ever wanted to do. The world told you you're not allowed to do that. But the truth is, if you can figure out how to get back to that play, which is why it's coming through so powerfully on this full moon, get back to that play, find some way to just enjoy life, you will produce something worth value in this world. That's actually what makes the world develop. That's the most valuable thing you can create. The irony in that is monetarily, that would be the most monetarily beneficial thing you could ever do for yourself, is find a way to play. So, a powerful message coming through, guys. Sorry, I'm way behind on the comments. Sorry if I miss any of these comments, guys, but I appreciate all of you, and I really hope that does help. Yeah, that message. Giving you a practical step in that for anybody that's watching. If you're somebody that's watching and you're wondering, okay, I recognize that this is true. I can feel what you're saying, Chris, but how the fuck am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to reinvigorate a relationship with something that's inside of my head now, right? That doesn't feel real, right? Without losing my mind in the process or making everybody in my life abandon me because I'm doing something that looks fucking crazy. How do I do that? Well, you don't have to. You only have honesty and truth. There's levels to it, right? So just because you're starting to see something as true that other people are saying doesn't mean you have to go broadcast it everywhere immediately, right? You can take those truths in bites and process them first and then incorporate them into your being. And once they're incorporated, they'll be demonstrated to other people automatically. You won't have to explain them or argue for them. Actually, matter of fact, that's the only way it should happen, right? But practically by essentially dating yourself, right? But in the best way. So like, what would you... if you were a kid again and it was just you, right? There was nothing else nobody else that you could worry about, and you could do anything you wanted to do, anything. And I mean anything. What would you do? Right? The only thing that you have to do after that is actually go do it. Right? Now, if it's a big one, if you imagined like going to Disneyland or something and it's not practical, then just take an echelon down. What's an actionable step? What did you like to do when you were a kid that you did on a regular basis that brought you joy, that you looked forward to? Maybe even something that your parents never gave you, right? Something that you always wanted that they would never do because it was too wasteful or it was this or that or that. Give yourself the permission to go do that now, and go do it with yourself now, and especially by yourself. Make a point to do it by yourself, because you're obviously not by yourself. You're doing this with yourself. So it's a weird process. My version of it was going to McDonald's. I mean, it sounds really odd, but my first time I did this, it came to me in like a download, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna go take. I literally had the conversation. I was like, Chris, what do you want? Like, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to? And the first thing, and you'll notice something stupid will pop in your head. You will probably have forgotten, like I did, the little things that would make you happy when you were a kid. It doesn't take big things usually. Kids can get happy on the smallest stuff. For me, it was like a Happy Meal from McDonald's. I had completely, and in that moment, I remembered how much joy going and getting a Happy Meal brought me when I was a kid, and how excited I would get. And so I was like, okay. I was dieting at the time and stuff. I was like, let's go to McDonald's. Let's get a Happy Meal. And so I drove myself to McDonald's, got a Happy Meal, and I sat there and had a conversation with myself. And I could feel that joy inside. Again, I re-experienced what it felt like. It makes me emotional to go through a drive-through with my parents in a McDonald's when I would get excited. You get to open up the toy and shit. We don't give ourselves permission to get excited about things anymore when we're adults. But you still can. It's not like you don't have the capacity to anymore. You just won't allow yourself to, So find something like that, guys. That's what I'll leave this live with tonight. And again, apologies for not getting to more of the comments here, but I don't want to take on too much energy all at once in one night, especially on a full moon, because it's such the veil is so thin, right? But I hope that helps anybody that's watching tonight. Thank you so much, Rebel. And for everybody that's donated tonight and helped support me, I really appreciate it. This is what I do for a living, so your donations really do help support what I do. If you are interested in anything else I do a podcast called The Unfounded Podcast. It's actually part of how I started this journey. It documents the last 3 years of the awakening process I've been going through. So if you are interested, if you are going through the awakening process right now, if you want somebody to go with that, through that with you, if you often find yourself stuck contemplating ideas that you can't find anybody else to talk about with, check out my podcast, The Unfounded Podcast. That's what I did for 3 years, is talk to myself about things that I couldn't talk about with other people. So you can find that on my profile page. Just go to my link tree. All the links are in there. And I will be back on here very soon doing more channeled messages and some other projects that I have in the works too, some other creative stuff for a little more fun and engaging things for the community. So, but with that, that's kind of what I got for tonight. Let me scroll to the bottom here, catch up on some of the comments and things, and we'll get out of here. I need to clean myself up. I tend to cry almost every live, guys. So just be prepared for those of you that are going to be here on a regular basis. Let's see here. Wow, I'm way behind. Sorry, guys. Thank you for all the comments. I apologize I couldn't get to all of these. I really do intend to, but as you can see, when I go into it, when I start channeling, I get lost for quite a while sometimes. So, thank you, Megan. I saw that. I appreciate you leaving that in there. This was a very beautiful live, and all the energy, everybody that was in here, genuinely thank you for being here. This was so healing for me. I think about that. There was almost 70 people in here at one point, but over 40 to 50 most of the time. And in today's day and age, a modern day where we can get people to sit around for an hour and a half and talk about things like this, like healing themselves, making themselves feel better, making the world a better place, that says something about the direction we're moving, right? I think that this is now becoming the entertaining thing to do. And that's how it should be, I think. Right? You know what I mean? Because it is entertaining. It's fun. This is fun. It's fun to heal yourself. It's fun to be good to yourself. It's fun to say the truth. So more of that, please. Right? Let me see here. I'm just trying to get to the love. Absolutely, user. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Good night, lady. Thank you for being here. Absolutely, Lori. Thank you. And anybody, I think I did get more subscribers. Thank you for anybody that did subscribe or join or follow. Again, really appreciate you guys. And I send you all a whole lot of love. Check my page out. I'll usually have stuff coming out every day, if not every other day. So I'll see you soon. Alrighty. Good night. Happy full moon.